and get started. Welcome everybody to our November TPA membership meeting. We appreciate everybody taking the time this morning to join us for a great day to hear from Kristen, Jennifer, and the PA Start team. Patrick will welcome all of our guests, but just a couple quick housekeeping items. We are recording the session today, so if anybody needs to leave partway through the session, we'll be circulating that to all members after the meeting, in addition to any materials that we cover during the session today. We are going to use the chat and the Q&A function. So if you do have any questions during the course of the meeting today, please feel free to do so in the chat and the Q&A. And with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick to get us started.
Well, thank you, Craig. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. So if you want to jump to, probably just jump to our next slide even after that, Craig. And so we'll start. Certainly, I want to welcome Kristen and Jen Newell for being with us today. As Craig noted, and as you've probably seen in our announcements, we also have today to talk about the PA Start program. And I'm also pleased that Michelle O'Toole has joined us today. So we have a full lineup. We have a lot of information to share. So as promised, we certainly want to very quickly get to our special guests today. I also want to thank Kristen and acknowledge a couple of things that as our tenures have kind of paralleled since we've begun these two jobs. Kristen has sort of created a tradition for us here by ending the year at our meeting. So I want to thank Kristen and ODP for that. Likewise, with the conference we've done the last several years, ODP has been really active with us. We really appreciate the engagement with our members. And we're very happy Jen Newell's been able to join us. We know the announcement went out about 10 days ago officially. So Jen stepping into the Bureau Director role for Financial Management Program Support, a role that Rick Smith had held very capably for pretty close to the last decade, I think last 8 or 9 years. So we're very happy that Jen was able to join us today. So with that, we can go next slide, Craig. I just want to cover a couple of things that I think will be a little bit informative. We haven't had the chance to really report out to members since our last October meeting. This is the first time we've met since then. And if you recall in October, we talked about a meeting Nancy Murray and I had scheduled with the budget secretary. When we scheduled that meeting, we had the offer of what other secretaries might we want to have included. So it was offered to us that Akbar Hussain and the Legislative Affairs Secretary would join us. And of course, we asked it would be great if Dr. Arkush could join us. So we did indeed have our meeting, and Kristen was there. So Kristen can certainly, I don't expect Kristen to weigh in, but obviously at this point, we think it's kind of important to sort of set foundation on where we are, give each of you as members a little report out on what happened at that meeting. So if you kind of go back to a couple of months, this is information we've shared pretty routinely. We've talked about what the budget ask is. As you can see, this is a collaborative effort among the 6 associations that are listed on the letterhead here. So the 3 main elements that we really wanted to get into in our meeting with the budget secretary really did deal with what you see on screen. Again, not new to anybody, but of course, when we're in a meeting where we want to show our data, we really want to frame what the advocacy looked like and how we developed our numbers, this is something that we certainly wanted to frame out. And these are in no particular order in terms of what we're showing, but I do want to give a little foundation as we head into some of today's updates and talk about performance-based contracting. So to be fair, I want to say that advocacy really is not a dialogue, at least not with ODP. We meet with our associations, we get your feedback, and we really try to formulate what it is we feel that we want to ask for. So again, that is really what is here. I don't expect Kristen or anybody from ODP to be able to comment. This is really our communication messaging of what we feel is important. And again, we feel that it's equally important that we're speaking in a unified voice with our colleagues from across the state. So Craig, if you can go to next slide, please. This is just some data, and this is clearly information that we took directly from ODP. We really acknowledge and want to show that this is a growing system. More people are coming into the system. We talk a lot about the waiting list. We did so at our meeting with the secretaries and Kristen, but we also wanted to sort of acknowledge the growth of the system. And these are customers who are coming in to services. So it's an advantage from the standpoint of folks that come in and utilize services. We know the struggles and sometimes that we have in providing those services and finding staffing, but this is key data from ODP. Next slide, please, Craig. We did, as you know here, we talk a lot about sustainability. And we highlight this phrase because this was published by the state in August. And when we refer to old rate setting methodology, which I love to say, and I will continue using that term because we like to push this in a direction of moving towards something that can be sustainable by use of some form of annual index. This is a conversation that we're pleased we're continuing to have with the department. So if you go to next slide, please, Craig. I just want to highlight this. This is really where we ended our presentation with the secretaries. We went through a lot of the elements that are not new to any of you. They are certainly not new to the communications coming out of the department from Kristen that with respect to the goals and objectives of performance-based contracting of the multi-year growth strategy of this administration. But I also think you can kind of equate sustainability and program growth with thinking in terms of how do we continue to invest in our system and how do these other things really follow suit with an ongoing investment. So this is important. We sometimes also forget when we're talking, particularly to legislators, to highlight such things as there are federal matching dollars when we're asking for funding. But we really wanted to sort of end with the return on investment, what we hope to see in working together in collaboration with our colleagues in government, U.S. providers, all stakeholder groups, and other partnerships in and outside of the IDA stakeholder community. So next slide, Craig. I kind of want to get into some of the data. This is something that we shared. I think we've shared it on a limited basis. It was certainly information that we wanted to highlight going into a meeting with the budget secretary, which again is an opportunity to really look at data, support what we're asking for, make arguments. And I hope this isn't too busy. I'll just briefly comment on what we're really showing is wages, DSP wages tracking toward inflation. Certainly, there's been a very high increase in inflation over recent years. And you can see ODP rates. This is the orange bar on this table. And you can see generally, it's our criticism that these remain flat for 3 years. 2 of 3 years, we have received rate increases. So you can see that otherwise, we would not be anywhere close to inflation. You can also see the DSP wages, to the credit of all of you as employers, tend to track more toward inflation anyway. So this is data that we wanted to show, and somewhat conspicuous there is the blank where we really don't have DSP wage data for 2024. So if you go next slide, Craig, this is just really the inputs. This is information that came from recent data and surveys. And again, you can see we needed to have the data for the 2024 year, and we wanted it post implementation of new rate increases. So, with that, I think we were probably some of my colleagues together with Kristen and with Jen back on October 22nd at the Isaac. This issue actually came up in discussion. And I think some of us huddled and pretty much right then and there said we really need to get a survey together. So, Craig, next slide. We did just open a survey this past Tuesday collectively. We'll see if we can get this out in the chat here. You can go to the message. I'm sure we have it hanging off the site. We encourage everybody to complete this survey. And I am pleased that we do have demographic information in this survey. So this is something, I've promised many of you who have raised this to me. I've promised Kristen in the past, this is something that we want to look at. We know that the NCI State of the Workforce Survey is something the state will be producing. We will be promoting that as well. I believe that will open in February. But this is very critically important. If you've looked at the schedule, we encourage you all to do it. It is now open. We will close collections December 20th. We will have a published report as soon as January 17th for your use to share with Kristen, ODP, government officials, our legislators at a key time in our advocacy as the budget is about to be announced and released. So I want to give credit to Steve Forrest. He is the person that actually put the demographic information in there. Otherwise, I was prepared to probably apologize once again to many of you and to Kristen for not having that information. To Steve's credit, he had built that just from the feedback we gave him last year. So I encourage you to complete the survey, speak with your colleagues. We will try to see if we can get Steve to do some type of a training as well. So thank you, everyone. With that, we can go to next slide, Craig. And so really, we want to talk certainly foundationally a lot about performance-based contracting today. And these are some of the elements that we note that we have heard from you, that we have asked questions about, that myself among our colleagues among the associations have talked a lot about. So there's a lot of information really coming out right now. We're in a period where I certainly, without any further delay, want to bring in Kristen, welcome her, and give her the stage to kind of walk through her perspectives and share information she has prepared for all of you today. So Kristen, thank you very much for being here today.
Well, and before I get started, I'd like to, I know you noted that Jen was on with us, but want to give Jen a chance to say hello and introduce herself to the members, and then she's got to scoot off to a budget meeting. So, Jen?
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. As Kristen and Patrick mentioned, I'm Jen Newell. This is nearing my second full week with ODP. I'm really excited to be here. If you looked at my bio, you probably noted that I've spent about the last 22 years in the field of substance use disorder at Pennsylvania's Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs, most recently overseeing their budget, procurement, rate setting, IT projects, quality improvement, training, and some other administrative pieces. So I've been in the last few weeks just really learning about your system and the great ways that ODP and your provider network can work together, and really look very forward to meeting each of you and working with you, and just understanding more about the excellent work that you all do each day.
Jen, and we're thrilled to have Jen on board, and she's diving right in. So, and testament to that, she's got to run off to a budget meeting. So, thanks, Jen. All right, Patrick, you can go to the next slide here. So I want to get into a couple of things here. One, the Office of Vocational Rehab has now had a couple of public meetings. They are in a bit of a world of hurt with, in terms of federal funding. They were informed that they're flat funded for this federal fiscal year. They're on the federal fiscal year, so their budget cycle runs a little different than ours. They're an October 1 start. They are flat funded, which as you all know, flat funding essentially amounts to a cut, as you are watching things like rate and other expenses increase. And then they are anticipating a similar for next year, the following federal fiscal year. And so to that end, in order to manage their costs, they have begun the discussions about moving back into an order of selection. They anticipate they will be doing that in January or February. So we have been preparing, sort of, pulled the bulletin, our joint bulletin, out of the dustbin, to make sure that there isn't any updating or anything that we need to do in terms of policy and procedure related to our interface with them now that they are reinstating that order of selection. Our intent with OVR is always that, well, a couple of things. One, to minimize transitions for individuals, certainly minimize, and to the extent we can, eliminate individuals needing to switch providers as they're moving between funding sources. And because we have a waiting list, making sure that people that don't have access to other funding for job supports are prioritized in terms of the OVR funding. So we constructed the policy between our waivers and then the agreement with OVR that essentially, people will be referred if they are on the waiting list, they don't have access to waiver services, they will be prioritized in terms of those referrals. Anyone who isn't a waiver who wants to be referred can be, but we really have tried to eliminate this requirement that everyone is referred over, and everyone has to be served by OVR before they're served through the waiver. So, look for either, a sort of a republication of that bulletin, or some edits to it to make sure that we've got our priorities in line and the procedures to sort of support that. The other kind of quick note I want to make here is that we did conclude the period of time where we had extended this for providers. We had heard there were a number of providers that had their plan segments between the first quarter and the 3 following quarters didn't have the right balance of units, and they were unable to bill without critical revisions to plans. So we had extended the timeline for providers to get their claims in for us to do gross adjustments for the difference between the old rates and the new rates. We had extended that to the 18th of this month. We do think we've probably got the vast majority of those claims in. The gross adjustments will be noted on remittance advice now the 23rd of December based on the extension that we provided there. So we did hear, we do have some providers, I don't know, this I think was mostly seemed to be isolated to the southeast, but you'll all tell me if I'm incorrect on that. We had some providers because of lags with SEOs that were unable to get their claims submitted because the critical revisions had not been submitted. So for providers, we are asking that anyone who thinks that they have a substantial amount of claims that were not submitted and could not be submitted by the 18th of November, please alert us, email Josh Kaufman and let him know that. We will, for providers who have done that, we will rerun those numbers, Jen, since you're still on January, February. Now, the caution here is that if there was any kind of overpayment, if there were voids or whatnot in claims, we will have to recoup those funds. So, just be cautious just in terms of thinking of kind of where you are in terms of the volume of claims that may be missing. So I think that's it on gross adjustments and the rates. I'm happy if there's questions or anything, people can certainly put those in the chat, and we have the benefit of Jen here for a couple more minutes. All right, let's go ahead to the next one then. So another update on ARPA funding. I know there seemed to be some confusion around the technology and credentialing ARPA payments that were out there. We had sent out a reminder to everyone that we needed to have, all the spending needed to be completed by October 31st of 24. And we had a pretty decent volume of providers, and a couple of the associations reached out with, hold on, we thought the deadline was March of 25. So we, had everybody kind of look back at the announcement, which was the state had until November of 25. That was the federal extension that we had received, which meant we extended that spending period through the end of October of this year. Now, given the volume of those and some of the concern, and we know there were some issues beyond provider control to some extent with how long it took for NADSP to accredit all of our courses, things like that. So we did go ahead and extend that spending through, I'm not, you know what, don't quote me on it, Michelle. I'm looking at you. I'm not going to say we extended. I think we may have extended it through the 31st of 25, March 31st of 25. But anyway, we did provide that extension. We did republish that. What that also sort of alerted us to is that because so we actually had two federal extensions of this. The federal extension for all states, which was initially through 3/31/25. And then we had Pennsylvania specifically requested another extension through June of 26, which was granted. So, I think what this did alert us to in ODP is that we have a number of initiatives that have ended. We have other initiatives we have elected to extend. And then we had some that we, allowed to sort of close out either on schedule or after one extension. So we will publish an update. We had, I think, all told 17 or 18 initiatives. So we will publish sort of here was the initiative, here was the start date, here was the end date, or when the end date will be, so everyone has some awareness of the multitude of those different projects. So the ones that we are extending, so that are continuing at this point, are The Tech Accelerator contract with Tech Owl at Temple University, we are extending that one. That was one that was very hung up in procurement. And so it took a long time to get that one off the ground. So we will extend the life of that contract. We are extending, we have the startup funding for transitions from institutional care. We have two pieces. One, consolidated waivers that are being funded in their first year through ARPA, and then we have startup funding. Those will continue into 2026. We have respite and family support dollars to the counties that there was funding, there was unspent funding there. We have pushed that funding back out to counties, so those will continue for the counties that had not spent their full amount. They will be allowed to spend that through this fiscal year. We have extended the ARPA payments for the consultation that we're using from Mercer to support performance-based contracting. And then we extended, as I said, the credentialing and the technology initiatives are being extended. The other thing I want to point out is that we have also repurposed some unspent funds, some unspent ARPA funds for pay for performance for residential services. So these were unspent funds from other ODP initiatives, or we also were able, we had the benefit of another program office in DHS shifting. They have transferred some of their unspent funding to ODP. So we were able to put that into the pay for performance this year as well for credentialing and technology. All right, next slide. So let's get into performance-based contracting. In terms of updates, as you know, I think everyone's aware, the first tier determination period is over. We did have 31 applications for providers. 21 of those were for, or sorry, I'm doing my math incorrectly here. We had 6 and 15. We did have 21 clinically enhanced and select providers submit in the first round. It is accurate that no one who applied for select or clinically enhanced was met that tier determination criteria. We have, I don't know in total, but I believe at least a handful of those providers did submit resolution forms where there is a process that is available with performance-based contracting. If a provider thinks that our data is incorrect or they need to, they have documentation that demonstrates that, our calculations were improper, they have that opportunity. So we do have some of those. The deadline for that was the 20th, I believe, to get that form in with any supporting documentation. So we are reviewing those. So in essence, we still, the final determinations for those remaining applications have not been completed. I will say, I know we expect there was definitely a lot of learning. Both we had on process issues from what we could see, sort of common errors in provider applications and data submissions. There are some things that we can refine, I think, that will correct some of that in terms of the data submission form. We also had a number of providers have shared with us some suggestions or recommendations for how to improve the actual process of the data collection. So you can expect that we will make those refinements before the February-March submission time period. I also have committed to have a conversation once we have made the final determinations on those resolution forms that were submitted, and we provide the final tier determination to those providers who submitted those. I have already committed. I am willing to sit down. I know the associations have some interest in having some conversation about some of the different measures and what we have learned from those first periods. So I have committed to doing that until this round is complete. I'm not meeting with anyone regarding this. questions. But we will happily meet with folks after this. Our commitment here, we want and need select and clinically enhanced providers. I think everyone was not happy with the outcome of this first round, and so we will meet, and I think if there are adjustments to be made, then we will do those.
Kristen, are you able to talk at a high level about the handful of reviews that you reference in terms of what types of things? Is it strictly this is still objective review and people are questioning whether all the data was included? Are you able to say anything at all about where that's at in the process?
I mean, all I can say high level about process is, a lot of these determinations, a lot of these measures are pass fail based on data. So, one of the things I think we, wouldn't have been surprised to see is for the follow-up from hospitalization, we are using our Medicaid data, and we do get crossover claims from Medicare. So if someone, was seen, paid through either of those two insurance forms, it should show up in claims for us. We also know we had during the comment period, we had a provider who alerted us, well, we use our own, it's a provider that has, a psychiatrist on staff. We do that internally and we don't bill it. So you're never going to see our follow-up claims for some folks. So those are the kind of data elements that we kind of, we are looking for. If we don't have visibility, if we got it wrong for whatever reason, give us the documentation that these things occurred. Yes, this person had an inpatient hospital, psychiatric and hospital inpatient. They saw, our provider on this date and then this date not billed to Medicaid. Then, we can certainly adjust our data and our assumptions for that provider and that evaluation based on that. So that's the claims. That is the resolution process, is show us how and why we are wrong in terms of this data collection. So again, I can't speak to the specific forms that came in until they're done. When they are done, I can certainly make some comments if there are some trends or things that we are seeing from those secondary submissions.
Okay, sure. Thank you. I think that answers Patrick's question in the Q&A. And then timing, can you talk to timing at all as far as how long that may take?
Let me actually answer Karen's question. So the main disqualifiers really were, I mean, it was a combination. I think we did have some where on the more qualitative, describe to us or not describe, but demonstrate how you use data related to improving outcomes on polypharmacy. We had some submissions where nothing was submitted. We had some where there may have been a policy statement or something, but no demonstration of the data being used, data sources, how that data was reviewed, nothing to sort of connect this notion that, select and clinically enhanced providers should be using data to support better individual outcomes. So there were quite a few of those, but in large part, the disqualifiers were the straight up data. So, the incident management, unreported incidents beyond the typical, the timely finalization measures sort of outside of the allowable percentages, the follow-up hospitalization for some, HRS, the timely clinical reviews for HRS was another one. So some of those, the straight data just was, did not meet the standard. So it was definitely a mix, but I would say in large part it was where the data just didn't match.
Okay. Is it fair and accurate to say that of the 21 who applied for either select or clinically enhanced, 19 of the 21 were disqualified on the data you just mentioned, the incident management and the timing and that?
Patrick, I'm not going to answer that.
Yeah, I'm not trying to pin you down. I'm trying to base that on really, that was the takeaway from the October 4th provider forum. So I'm just kind of going back to that.
Yeah, I wouldn't put numbers to it, but I would say in large part, yes. And in some cases it was both of those things I just mentioned, there was, one of those data elements, the data did not, the performance, just the straight data was a fail. And then there may have been some of those other aspects that also did not. There were very few providers that had just one thing that disqualified them. There were typically a number of them. The other thing we'll commit to, I know we shared some of that at the last summit. We will have at least one summit. We have a scheduled summit between now and the application period, but we will have sessions for providers in preparation for the January, February submissions, because I think there's definitely a lot of learning. I think we can certainly help point, providers to some things to consider in terms of the applications. The question, PAR had sent a series of questions to ODP. So a couple of things on this. One, please keep checking back to the FAQs for performance-based contracting. We do continue to update those. PAR had submitted a bunch of member questions. Some of those are getting added to that online piece. But one of the things I asked PAR, you don't have to answer this today, but would be helpful as an answer, is, we had, during the sort of public comment period and the rollout of all of this, there seemed to be a lot of concern about ODP publishing specific performance data other than tier determination, right? Like that we would be publishing percentages on the incident management or, on the HRS, any of the data that we had, that there was a concern, and I had sort of gotten the message that providers did not have any interest in that being published online. And so we've had a number of questions about publishing data, and I know you saw that we did do the pass-fail for some of the measures. My question to the associations is, do you want us to go beyond the pass-fail and actually publish by MPI the actual performance on those? For, this would be the HRS performance, all of the incident management performance, the follow-up from hospitalization. I feel like I keep missing one today. But where we would be publishing, either we could do two things. We can do it by MPI, again, just pass fail, or actually publish provider percentages and actual performance. So don't need to answer that today. We seem to be, the recent PAR letter gave me a sense that providers might be interested in those being published, so that that's available. So think about.
I will say we don't have a poll set up on it, but certainly I'll welcome our members to put it in the chat right now if you know the answer to that question, and we can give you feedback on the basis of research.
Okay. Yeah. We've obviously got a little bit of time, but that was a question I posed back to PAR, and would certainly want your input. I think I asked PAR if the associations, plural, support that. So I'd love some feedback from TPA members on that.
And I will say the associations are having this conversation about performance-based contracting, so we are all talking among each other, and I would expect that we would do something collectively to you in terms of recommendations and thoughts and information we would like to see as well.
Good.
So I'll add my contribution as well. I'll encourage members to do the same. Communicate with all of us, all the associations you participate with. Make sure we're hearing from you so we can pass that on.
That's good. I know there's been a continuing question about kind of where we landed with provider agreements. At this point, the way I think of this as essentially 100% of residential providers have submitted the agreements. The outstanding agreements are, at this point, I believe, all situations where there's a revoked license pending appeal, or Medicaid agreement termination. So I don't know that it is going to be entirely relevant whether or not those particular providers submit back a provider agreement. So for all practical purposes, I think we're at 100% on the agreements. We're, in great shape in terms of our approval of the federal approval of all of our amendments. We are getting close on our the contract for the performance analysis services, but that procurement is still underway. Joe put in the chat, wouldn't it be helpful for providers to know why other providers are coming up short selecting clinically enhanced? Yeah, and that's, so again, we had sort of gotten that it wouldn't be productive to be publishing the specific performance in each area. That, what was certainly preferred from the provider standpoint was just the web page would just include tier determinations. Now, the way we did this before, and this is how we would do it again, it's not tier assignment will be on the DHS webpage, quite public, right? So, somebody could go look at what the description of select is and then see who the select or primary providers are. We used my ODP, not the DHS website. We used my ODP to publish a spreadsheet by MPI that said pass fail. So, I think that is the mechanism we would look for. This would not be on the DHS page. It would be by MPI. So if this is desirable, we are certainly willing to do that. But
Kristen, would there be a happy medium though? I mean, if I equate it to the compensation study, for instance, where we de-identify everybody's information, we talk about the mean, the median, the percentiles. I mean, at least people could sort of see relative to those benchmarks where they stand. So just a suggestion for consideration. If not, people may be uncomfortable, individual information is out there for them that could be determined by somebody or shared inadvertently, versus at least some kind of summary of where things are. And I also want to just kind of call out for everyone, when you talk about contracting, everyone does need to submit who has not submitted. So we would expect residential providers, 370 or so, still will need to submit data to ODP in February, March, correct?
Yeah. Let's go ahead to the next one here. So pay for performance. Hopefully everyone saw the announcement that went out a couple of weeks ago related to the pay for performance. You will see that the sort of structure of all of the design of each of these for pay for performance is essentially the same. I think, we heard loudly and clearly and fully appreciate that this performance-based contracting is a really big lift and costs money to do. That credentialing in and of itself, credentialing is a big lift. It's expensive. The time out of complement, the time for staff to be training, setting up internally structures to support credentialing, pay, doing any adjustments with pay scale or bonuses for DSPs that are in frontline supervisors that are achieving different credentials, that all costs money. And so, the structure of the same with TAC, like we understand to be successful in performance-based contracting over time, you've got to be good at data management. You've got to have systems in place to do it. We've got the measures related to EHR. All of this costs money. So this first year is really about providing some funding to do that capacity building. So we're essentially going to be paying for reporting. So we've got 1% for this fiscal year for providers that submit a plan, and the announcement outlines the many, many points that you will have to address in your plan. If you notice, the time period to submit that is the same time period you'll be submitting your data submission for the overall performance-based contracting. But the first payment is for that reporting, and that first payment is 1% of your residential revenue for calendar year 24. Those payments will be May of 2025 is when those payments would go out for providers that submit that report. So kind of that initial investment to help providers kind of get the credentialing piece off the ground. Then that next fiscal year, we're really looking at the scaling of that. So expectations for hitting benchmarks for select clinically enhanced, the benchmarks that are built into performance-based contracting, 5% increase for DSPs at a minimum, 10% for frontline supervisors. For primary providers, an expectation you have to do at least 2% increase or whatever you have established as a target. We will look when we get to 26, 27, we will continue paying for those kinds of improvements and increase towards benchmarks. And then by 28, 30, we want, as a system, we expect that we will be at a place where we can have a system benchmark. And we think that we will probably be able to have a system benchmark there at somewhere between 20 and 40%. Obviously, we'd love to see 40%, but we'll see kind of, what the growth has definitely been accelerating in terms of how many credentialed DSPs we have. But this one, we'll see what we get in terms of the provider percentages in 25, 26. And then, as we get into 26, 27, we'll make some decisions about where that benchmark is reasonable for 28, 30. But the idea here is that we ultimately will have a workforce that is credentialed at some percentage between 20 and 40% by that time period. So if you go to the next one, and all told, the investment here is right around $40 million over between now and June of 26. So there's a combination of ARPA funding and what was in the enacted budget for performance-based contracting. All right, next slide. So same kind of idea here, right? We've got to do some initial investment related to technology. And this one, we wrote very broadly because we know there's kind of two pieces to this. We want and need providers to be adopting enabling technology, remote supports, really building that into how you are delivering services for individuals, supporting better health and safety, supporting wherever we can, reduction in reliance on staff. So, and obviously the piece that, for success in performance-based contracting, our whole system needs to get much better at data management and the use of electronic records. So investment up front here, again, this is capacity building, paying for reporting. So we're going to ask for a plan related to, what technology and what your intended use of it is. We will, and then this payment is essentially over between 24 and 26 will be 0.3% of residential. You get half up front to kind of have that funding to invest. And then in 25, 26, we will pay out the remainder based on actual costs and you having implemented whatever that technology was that you purchased. 26 to 30, we will look at, continued use of assistive tech, remote supports. By then, we will also have much better data. We do not have great data on how embedded. We have reasonable data on EHRs because you all provided that to us. We will have even better data on EHRs after our data submission in February and March. And we will have, from collecting it here, better insight into the types of technology and how much of it is actually being used within to support individuals. So by 26, 30, I think we can sort of refine some of those and start looking at some other more concrete outcome-based data related to technology. But we've definitely got some foundation to build here. All right, next one. All right, same kind of structure here. We want to pay for some upfront capacity building. I know the inclusion of employment for residential providers was something that we received a lot of resistance to. Probably you are all tired of hearing me say that employment is everyone's responsibility. So we kept it in there, but we want to do two things here. One, we know that not all residential providers have been sort of set up to support employment in the way that it could be. And so we know in some cases this means, there could be some additional training. It could be having a position or part of a position that is sort of dedicated to supporting the notion of residential. It may be, investing in someone who can, kind of sharing some of the costs of the benefits, some benefits counseling, so that people in residential have better sense of all of the myths around losing benefits if you're working. whatever that is. We know it's going to take some residential providers building some structure around this, changing, organizational culture or the kinds of supports that are available for the DSPs, for the frontline supervisors, for individuals, so that you can really promote employment. And to that end, for this fiscal year, you're going to submit a plan for, what and how you are approaching competitive integrated employment. We will pay for that plan at 0.3% of residential revenue. Then we're going to start paying for employment outcomes in 25-26. So for agencies that increase from baseline, and this will look familiar to you, we did this with CPS, employment and supports coordination, kind of early in the ARPA funding cycle. So if you are an agency, a residential agency that increases the number of working age adults who have competitive integrated employment, then we will be providing outcome-based payments, essentially of $2,500 per person, needs group 1 to 2, and $7,500 for needs groups 3 and above. I think, and do want to note here, this isn't any employment. This is, we would be just looking at individuals who have 10 hours or more a week. But pretty good investment. I think it also acknowledges, there's a very different competitive integrated employment rate between needs group 1 and 2 and needs groups 3 and up. The difference between a needs group 1 competitive integrated employment rate is about 36% statewide, and that holds in residential. Needs group 4 is 5%. So really big difference in there. We know it often takes more if someone is in a higher needs group to get them into employment, keep them in employment. So certainly tried to acknowledge that in terms of the available funding. All right, next slide. So supports coordination, we are we have, as we've, kind of got the federal applications done and all of that had, refocused now on the supports coordination performance-based contracting. We did release, and I'm hoping you all saw it. If you didn't, you did great. We did release the draft of the performance measures for supports coordination. This is not a formal comment period. We did present to Isaac. So both through your Isaac member, which is Marisol, Patrick is the alternate, we will take, if there's feedback from Isaac members or feedback from the actual strategic thinking work group members, which TPA has a number of members who do sit on that. We have invited both Isaac and the strategic thinking group to provide us any feedback before we go to the formal public comment period. So, we have already gotten a few things back that, I think are good adjustments to those performance measures. So, to the extent that anyone has comments, please filter those through either one of your work group members or through Marisol and Patrick. The other piece that's been kind of heavily underway is rate setting work related to supports coordination and moving to performance-based contracting. We intend to get away from the 15-minute unit for supports coordination and move towards more of a monthly rate per person. So we are working, we did some work with the strategic thinking group. We're obviously working with Mercer then on design for this, but that will also be part of all of the published package in this spring. All right, next one. And I won't, particularly in the interest of time, you have these slides, and I think one of the things we've spent a lot of time kind of getting into all of the operational aspects and the really detailed work related to performance-based contracting. Since we have sort of reinvigorated now the discussion about supports coordination, I do think it's important to go back to the why we were doing all of this, why we identified residential and supports coordination to move into these performance-based contracting arrangements. really specific to supports coordination in terms of, all of this is an effort to improve quality, sustainability of our system, address some of those workforce issues. As you review the performance measures for supports coordination, please keep in mind, part of this is you're going to see a lot of alignment and support across the measures for supports coordination and residential. So you will see, one of the things around sustainability workforce is reducing reliance on ResHab. As a system, we are still very heavily reliant on it. We haven't necessarily done a great job historically of making sure people have alternative, if they need the 24/7 residential, that they have a less restrictive alternative in supported living, in life sharing, that they have the opportunity to have some of their needs met through technology. We've not done a great job of that. We can't do that by only applying pressure to residential providers. That has to start at that planning, that individual planning with the supports coordinator. And so you will see, we are definitely applying pressure and expecting some changes at the supports coordination level around how adept and skilled our supports coordinators are at having conversations with individuals and families about non-residential options. Pennsylvania has a really robust package of non-residential options. They have been designed to support people across a lifespan. We adopted Life Course in 2016. We are not, great yet about making sure that we're doing that anticipatory planning, that the conversations that we're having with young children in our system are leading to different outcomes than we've sort of seen historically. And so you'll note where we are trying to get at that through some of the performance measures for supports coordination. And please, if we have missed them, let us know, because those two pieces, the residential and the supports coordination, really need to go together. Very concretely, one of the other things that you're going to see on the supports coordination side is performance measures related to data accuracy. We are moving, performance-based contracting is a data-heavy, data-reliant process. And there are a number of these data elements that we rely on supports coordination to be collecting for us timely and accurately. And so you're going to see pressure there just to support the overall movement to, that supports what we're doing in the multi-year program growth strategy. It supports what we're doing with performance-based contracting. And so as you're reviewing all of those measures, just kind of keep all of that in mind. All right, and you can skip the next one and we'll get right into the timeline. So the supports coordination timeline follows the residential one pretty, it mirrors what we did a year ago with residential. So we had been meeting with the strategic thinking group for supports coordination after reconvening them in December of 23. Put together the performance measures, got a lot of feedback on rate design as we want to move away from 15-minute units. We will be submitting in April for public comment. You will have the opportunity for rates, implementation guide for supports coordination, 1915B4, 1915C amendments, and the performance measures themselves. So very, very parallel to what we did with residential. This will just be specific to supports coordination. We'll get those to CMS in July, and then we will be looking for implementation in January of 26 for supports coordination. All right, next one. And so for supports coordination, general design here that we settled on was just 2 tiers, not 4 like we have in residential. So there's just going to be a primary tier and a select. Biggest distinction between the two of them is you're going to see for select SCOs, they're often for primary. We're going to have some attestations reporting delayed data. On the select side, in many of those cases, there's going to be a specific benchmark they have to meet. And so I think our very first example here, I just pulled a few of the different performance measures to give you a sense of what's in there. The very first one, if you go to the next slide, is a nice example of where you've got a distinction between you're going to test this and you're going to do this versus you have a percentage standard to hit an actual performance measure. So for one of the issues that we've had with supports coordination over the last few years here is we have had supports coordination organizations just close their doors and say they're not taking any referrals. That's not, we can't do that. We have had individuals who have had to wait for supports coordination. That is not a way we can run our system. So SEOs will be required to keep their doors open. On the primary side, they're going to keep their doors open. We will validate that through our work back with county AEs. On the select side, not only do they have to keep their doors open, but they have to accept at a minimum 90% of referrals that come in for calendar year 25. We've made some adjustments here for smaller SEOs in that that's not necessarily reasonable in terms of impact and the business model. So we did adjust that to 75% for calendar year 25. All right, next slide. One of the other things we want to make sure that and this is kind of like parallel to the residential where we said, on average, the Commonwealth, not each provider, but the Commonwealth needs to assure that individuals receive residential services within 90 days of referral acceptance, 180 for supported living and life sharing. For supports coordination, that standard that we're committing to the federal government is 14 days. So primary is going to have to, both primary select, once that referral is accepted, they're going to have to start services within 14 days. On the select side, sort of higher standard, not only do that, but when you get the call that there is an individual in crisis, sudden unexpected death of a primary caregiver, so inpatient stay, someone has been incarcerated, is sitting in county jail, that they have to be able to initiate supports coordination within 48 hours. All right, next one. All right, this one is, I talked about we've got to have on this continuum of services on reducing reliance on traditional residential services related to our workforce, related to assuring that people have least restrictive settings. We're also applying pressure here on supports coordination. So, got to have a lead at a minimum, and have supports coordinators who really know what life sharing and supported living is and can have these discussions and plan. On the select side, they are going to have to have they're going to have to meet a baseline standard related to what their balance of residential, non-residential is. Getting off the ground here, we will obviously be, this will be a pretty understanding number. The number the last time we pulled is right around 39% of individuals enrolled in waivers are using a residential service. So this will be a reasonable number that we'll establish when we get closer to this number will be inserted when we do the public comment. And then they're going to have to be if they're below baseline for supported living and life sharing, they're going to have to attest that they will be increasing that number. All right, next one. And I know we're at 10. Patrick, I can stay about 2 or 3 more minutes. Multi-year growth strategy. To alert you, we did release all of the waiver capacity for this year has been released to counties. So people are being actively enrolled for those 1,500 capacity that we got in the state budget. We have a big forum with our administrative entities coming up on December 3rd to be going through all of the protocol process procedures related to how we will be doing waiver capacity management going forward. So we'll start rolling in counties that have demonstrated, our AEs that have demonstrated readiness to start managing differently. That will be beginning in this first quarter of this next year here.
Kristen, I know you've got to run, so I don't want to, I was hoping we could get to some of your NASD's experience, get that perspective.
Sure.
But you know what, I also want to kind of jump in because I know you're limited on time. I mean, I think you've said from the outset, performance-based contracting really needs to be a work in progress. And you've shown that, input, it feels like we have many opportunities yet, even before we go public on supports coordination. But if I can circle back to residential, I don't think there's a whole lot we can really glean from the sample. If you say it's roughly 10% of people submitted, but of that 10%, 60% did seek a higher tier, and all were denied. So it's hard to really grasp. I just want to ask your consideration as we go into this next round. The associations are all talking about this. I certainly want to say to you here, we'll continue to make that recommendation and hope that, if I go back to the numbers I cited, if 90% of the people got disqualified on incident management data, kind of an indication we're not going to be able to get to 25% of the providers. And I think a concern is we want to make sure some providers do indeed get qualified. And we know you want that, so we want to help accomplish that together. So again,
Yeah.
hopefully we can have that dialogue.
Let me say a couple of things about that, Patrick. We, on the just the data, like there's lots of things we have no visibility into that providers are submitting data on, right? But just on the data elements that we have visibility into for calendar year 23, we had providers that met those criteria that did not submit. So like, we know that. We obviously, if we had none, when we were looking at the data, that those numbers wouldn't have been right. The other thing, so we had some met the data we had, didn't submit. The other thing is we saw from the publication of the draft criteria, like even from the very first, the strategic thinking group before we went to public comment, we started seeing improvement in data. So our HRS data increase, like that improvement was very significant over time. We saw some improvements in terms of incident management. So I do think that we're also going to see improvement in the calendar year 24 data over the calendar year 23 data for sure, just based on what we saw from drafts of those documents and providers starting to tighten up some of their procedures around that stuff.
We know you have the knowledge of the data, and we certainly trust your judgment on that. But ultimately, we want to see people get into the tiers, of course. And
we
know
do
you
too.
Yeah. So
we do
again,
too.
anything we can do. I think also on the point of if indeed nobody gets in, I'll just kind of renew a conversation. We would hope you would open it up to those again to qualify again to broaden the pool so that as many as you can let in can get in and begin to provide these services. So I know we'll continue that dialogue. I know there's some time still. We want to make sure members understand. I've been getting some questions about the rules and when things will be available. We'll continue to just communicate that. We know we want people to prepare. It's not time yet, but I'll promise we'll answer those questions for members. We'll keep in touch with you. Are there any questions out there that you
let me do the federal stuff. I just got notice my meeting is not starting for a few more minutes, so I can stick with you for a second here. If you go to the very last slide, so I just came back from the National the National Association for State Developmental Disabilities Directors, and had an opportunity not only to meet with, there were some folks from CMS, but also obviously other state directors, and the association, a couple of the associations. Advancing States was also heavy in presence there. And one of the takeaways, I think there's a lot of concern and question about whether or not things like the access rule, there were four or five different huge regulatory packages that were promulgated this last spring. So a lot of question about what will happen. And what my takeaway here as it relates to the access rule is CMS is certainly continuing. They are behaving in a way that they will be implementing this. We actually have a pretty parallel experience here with the HCBS settings rule in terms of administration changes and like the time period for implementation. So, I think my takeaway is we should continue moving forward, that this will be implemented. CMS certainly seems to be, they're, continuing all their work. So, the first thing that we will be responsible to be doing is, well, we've got two things. One doesn't show up on here because it's related to money follows the person. It shows up on here as a 2028 deadline, which is the core measure set. Because we're a money follows the person state, we actually have to comply with that starting in 2026. We are in good shape to do that. I do not have concerns about our ability to do that. IM4Q has positioned us very well to meet the compliance standard there. We had to make minor adjustments to our sampling methodology, but we're in great shape there. our first big lift will be the fee-for-service grievance system. So we're still working through kind of procedurally what that will look like, but we're supposed to go live on that in 26. For 2027, again, I think we're in very good shape with incident management, so I'm not very worried about that. There are a few different provisions that I think are going to create some challenges for us at ODP, but we're kind of working through those, and we can certainly do a whole session just on the access rule and kind of how we're positioning to implement it. But I think the big news here is there is a full expectation that CMS will proceed just like they did with settings rule in implementing. They'll be issuing sub-regulatory guidance. They will be expecting states to have plans and be starting to meet these deadlines.
Yeah, good to see. We know we've been looking ahead to 2027 on many of these things. As you said, there's a lot to talk about here, and I know you don't have a lot of time to do it. Any other takeaways in terms of Pennsylvania's place nationally in terms of what's going on here? Obviously, a lot of initiatives. So, anything you can share there as well.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, everyone is very eager to hear kind of how the performance-based contracting plays out. There's a lot of interest in that because the issues that we're trying to tackle with it are the same. Like, most states report, the same kind of issues with workforce and looking at all kinds of different ways to shift and shape service delivery to support workforce. A lot of states investing in credentialing. A couple of things that stuck out for me. Tennessee is a technology first state, and they started their tech stuff a little before we did. They are at 15% of individuals who are using some kind of remote support or enabling technology, which I was like, that's where we need to be going. And I think we're going to start seeing some pretty good data coming out of Tennessee as they're collecting more. And a couple other states doing some outcome-based payments around technology, around credentialing. So, every state's kind of approaching it slightly differently because of however their state structure is. But nationally, definitely a lot of movement around NADSP and eBadge for sure. A number of states were reporting how they have been implementing that. One of the pieces that I was really interested in, we've got a couple of states who have arrangements with their community colleges. So the community colleges are doing some portion either of the training or you have the DSPs are actually earning some credit toward an associate's degree. So that was, I love that model. I think that's great. I think a lot of the training that our DSPs do could be college level and certainly worthy of college credits. So very, very interested to see how those things are playing out. And we have some follow up with a couple of the states. So. All right, my other meeting actually just started.
Yeah. Hey, what I'll do, I'll promise, because we're not going to get to everything. As I said, the associations are talking. We want to communicate on performance-based contracting. I'll promise everyone in membership, if you put that in, we will talk about that. Consider getting it to you, Kristen. We have a START program here. Do you want to say a couple words about START before you got to run off?
I have to jump to this
All
meeting.
Right.
So Michelle is on. Maybe she can say a few words.
We'll keep Michelle here. Kristen,
right.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing Jen along our next step as well. Take care.
All right. Take care. Have a good weekend.
You as well. Bye. And Michelle, I know you can join us. Craig, maybe we can go back to our deck here briefly. I just want to introduce David and Stephanie. Please hang on if you can till the end of the hour. A couple of announcements, but I don't want to delay getting to PA start. And maybe Michelle, I should go to you next. And there anything before we introduce David and Stephanie, welcome you in to say a few words as well, and then we will get into Pennsylvania start.
Oh, good morning. I don't know that I have anything to really add on what the deputy said. We're just all looking to work together to get these initiatives off the ground and make sure that we're supporting all the folks we want to support, as well as supporting the providers who make sure they're okay every day and live the life that they want to lead. And I completely defer to the folks from START to talk about START. I think everybody knows Pennsylvania was very eager to have START come into the state and how critical it is to support these folks who really need to have a network around them to meet all of their needs, and to really integrate both uh, support for habilitation and support for any kind of mental health needs. And that's really, what we expect out of that START model, is to develop those, help develop those networks and to bring those folks together, as well as add their clinical expertise. So we're thrilled to have folks here, and I'm delighted to let them explain what's up and what's going. I know the program has been growing in leaps and bounds.
Well, fantastic. Thanks, Michelle. So let's get to you guys, David and Stephanie. So welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
So Craig, I think we have the deck. I think we, thank you. I think we did get our tech resolved, I believe. So Craig, do you have that to share? Thank you.
There we go. Oh, all right. Thank you so much for having us. I am Stephanie Smingle, legal name Stephanie-Maytag. Brittany Feinkla is our program director. She had another meeting she had to attend today. So I am here. I'm the clinical director, and David Cummings is also joining. He is one of our county partners, and he works very much hand in hand with us. So David, please chime in anything you can add to your wealth of information. We are PA START. So what START stands for is we are systematic therapeutic assessment resources and treatment. So that's why we just go by START, because that's a handful to say all the time. A little bit of background. So PA START, it's the first in the state as of right now, and we are currently in Allegheny County. I know that they are looking to expand that into the Philadelphia area. I can't speak to where they are in that process, but I can always find that information if anyone is interested in that. START has been around for about over 30 years. It is an evidence-based model, and it came from the University of New Hampshire. You can go ahead to the next one. I'll go into what things that we do. What PA START is, it is taking two different systems. For many years, and I'm sure people here have experienced it, we had the bucket of IDD, autism, and then we had the bucket of mental health. And it was hard to communicate with each other. There were barriers. It was, well, I do this, you do this, how do we work together? PA START, or just START in general, comes together and helps break down those silos to say, hey, there is a lot of crossover, and this is how we can work together and how we can educate each other. We do offer 24-hour crisis. Our crisis looks like very different than what you might experience for your local county crisis is. If you would call your local county crisis, they would come out and they're going to be working directly with that individual. What START does is we're system-based, meaning we don't typically work with the individual directly, but we're going to be working with everyone who supports them. So if they're in residential, we're going to be working with the DSPs, the house managers. We might be even going up closer to directors if need be, just to see if we can kind of help bring a shift there. We might be working with families within schools, psychiatrists, even have gone to different PCPs and neurologists, specialists out there. So anyone who was part of that individual system, we work with them, we bring everyone together, and by doing so, we indirectly support that individual. So with that crisis, so we get a call, when we go out there, typically we would want the local crisis to also respond, so they work with that individual, and then we bring a very in-depth, it's multiple page crisis plan, and we talk with that system, what's gone, what do you need? Do you need modeling? Do you need some skills? And we help de-escalate them to reduce them in crisis, because we know if our individuals in crisis, our systems are also in crisis. So we want them to feel supported in that moment. And if need be, we'll model different things with that individual for that system. Be like, okay, this is what I can do. And then we also do a pretty in-depth emergency crisis assessment. We want to see if there's any patterns that's putting that individual into crisis. And we're not looking at, was there just a trigger? Because most likely, yes, there was some type of trigger, but also was there anything medically, anything socially, anything biologically? We want to look at the whole picture for that person, because we know if we look at a biopsychosocial perspective, we more than likely can see kind of what maybe put them into that crisis there. So, so again, we do work with our systems. We want to strengthen them, the effectiveness, and like strengthen them outcomes. So I know we're sitting here talking about outcomes earlier. We want to help so you guys can see like, okay, we're getting some better outcomes as well in any way that we can, whether or not it's bringing in some education, it's doing some training, doing some modeling, maybe it's kind of help bridging that gap between two systems. So there is clearer communication there. We also help with linkages. So we don't replace any service. Instead, we kind of look to see what services are out there. We help our best to enhance them. But if we do see maybe they need a linkage to something, maybe we're saying, well, they maybe could be experiencing seizures. We would want to make sure we help get that linkage for that neurologist there. So we would definitely work with that individual, work with the team to get that set up. Like I said, we don't replace anyone. Instead, we just work together to help enhance what everyone is currently doing. And then we are very strength-based. We use positive psychology. We are an evidence-informed, so we collect a lot of data ourselves and look in that. And then we are very person-centered. And then we do a lot of different collaborations, like I mentioned, with anyone you can possibly think of. We collaborate with. So typically that would be residential, schools, family psychiatrist, but not limited to any specialist. We've even kind of worked with, if they're building some natural supports with friends, getting releases for some social supports and working with those as well. Oh, okay, if you can go take me to my next slide.
Stephanie, I just wanted to jump in real quick and just to reiterate that the PA START team does not replace any system that's currently supporting any individuals. That is a question that comes up quite a bit, whether it could be a DDTT system, Maya, MTE, internal or external behavior supports. This will not replace anything, and there are no billing issues or billing questions with the services. So that's something just to keep in mind as folks are, considering different crisis supports, for the individuals that you support.
Thank you, David. Oh, yeah, I would say that is definitely the biggest question is, do you replace? We don't replace at all. We are here. We want to work with you guys. We know you are the expert. You're doing what you're doing well, and we're just kind of here to be that additional support there. Our overall goal is we want the systems, we want you to feel empowered. We want you to feel, I got this. I know this individual. I understand their diagnosis. I know interventions. I know ways we can support them, as well as kind of thinking long term. If that individual moves on, and if you get another individual like, oh, I learned this. Like, I think I can apply this to this person here, or this is a different way of thinking. So we're looking at also making some systematic change there. And then for the individuals, we do want to move them. Typically, they're coming in as a crisis. We want to move them to what we call PERMA. So that stands for positive relationships, engagements, meaning and accomplishments. We want them not just to be, oh, I'm at my treatment plan goals, I'm okay. We want them to have wellness, to feel, I know what to do. I feel safe. I have meaning in my life. So no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. And I can trust the systems I'm working with. So that's our overall goal. In START, we have a tier system. So if you ever hear us mention tiers, tier 4, that means we have weekly outreaches. So that means each week we're meeting with a different member of the system. So we might be meeting with residential, we might be meeting with an SC, we might be having a whole systematic meeting, and then we might be having one meeting with that individual directly, just do some assessments in the check-in to see how they perceive the quality of their care. Tier 3, that's when we have biweekly meetings with different members of the system. Tier 2 is monthly, and then Tier 1 is quarterly. So that's where we're heading towards PERMA, and we're just making sure everything that the work has been placed by everyone is being maintained. take me to the next one, please. All right, so referral status. So with PA Start Allegheny, we are accepting referrals. They are up on a weekly basis, and we currently are accepting up to 2 referrals a week. And then we are accepting an emergency referral. So I'm going to pass that along to David to talk about our status, and if you want to talk about that emergency referral.
Sure, absolutely. So with the referrals, just to give a quick overview, currently the wait list for referrals, because I know that that's often a big question whenever there's additional services. We're at about let's say 2 to 3 week hold time. So if there is someone that is, on your list that may benefit from something like Start, it's not going to be a several month turnaround until services can actually be initiated. So an emergency referral, I know the criteria will be in some other slides, and as well as the referral packet we had shared out with folks already. Emergency referrals, they can come in on an as needed basis. Referrals are sent to me, but there's also a DHS mailbox that'll be shared out. And those can go in addition to the 2 referrals a week that we're currently submitting for consideration. Is there anything else with that, Stephanie?
Nope, that was perfect. Thank you.
All right.
All right, if you can take us to the next one. All right, so what makes a good referral? If you can go to the next one, I'll go through it. So a referral might be appropriate if someone is currently in a crisis, if they have been hospitalized in the last 2 years, especially if they have been hospitalized multiple times during that time. So they've been in and out of placements within the last 12 months. If they have complex mental health needs and you're seeing that they are having constant crisis interventions. I'm also going to say if they have some complex medical needs in there, they need a mental health diagnosis, but we do try to focus on some of those medical needs as well. And if you're trying to determine if you're unsure of that diagnosis and what that treatment should look like. I know my team knows my status for as many referrals as we get in, and I know the stats for Pennsylvania, Allegheny. We have so many people come in with IED, autism, and schizophrenia that is way over the national average. And I don't think that Pittsburgh has all of every single person who has schizophrenia and autism. So we do try to tailor and pull apart, and we give our clinical impression, sorry, my light went out, of what that clear diagnosis is, and create that linkage and talk to a psychiatrist or get another psychological evaluation. And then another one is if someone is at risk for losing a placement for their home. So if you're thinking like, can we support this individual? We're thinking maybe we need to give them a 45-day notice. That might be a great time for that emergency referral to come in. Again, we have our process ourselves, but we would like to try to offer as much support as possible before those individuals at risk of losing their home.
So Stephanie, I just wanted to kind of jump in because I know that we are running out of time. We have about 2 minutes to kind of get through some of the information. So if we wanted to jump to the next slide, I can go through some of these and definitely hand it back to you.
Perfect.
So who can submit a referral? Often we get a lot of questions about this. Anyone within a person's team or system can submit a referral. It does not have to be a supports or service coordinator. Res providers, I've gotten them from social workers, hospitals, folks on the Allegheny County team, whether it's the Office of Behavioral Health or ODS, have all submitted referrals. The one criteria, though, is the person has to have IDD or ASD, as well as a mental health, behavioral health symptomology, and you have to reside in Allegheny County at this point. That may change as the START initiative continues to grow. One other criteria that we do need is either a service coordinator or a supports coordinator. We have to have that case management in place. START is not a long-term support. This is just kind of help guide and then turn the supports and the direction back over to the team. All right, we can go ahead to the next slide.
All right, so I'll wrap up here. So this is just how you make the referral. So the documents that are required are going to be a psychological evaluation with a full IQ scale. It does not have to be current. We have accepted them from anywhere from 5 to 10 years, I believe. The referral form that's shared out, the consent form, and then a medication list. And then other documents that would be helpful but not required, FBAs, behavioral support plans, the ISPs. Typically, we can pull those from the HCSIS if needed. Any other psychiatric evaluations, and IEPs and physicals. I do have some additional information in the PowerPoint, so if that's shared out, feel free to look through that. That's just more of the services that are within PA Start. And if you have any questions, I do have my contact information in there. Feel free at any time. You can send me an email. You can give me a call. The very last slide, yeah. I'm always happy to reach out. I am always happy if you want to have this discussion on a smaller scale as well, to come in virtual or to come in person to talk about this. Oh.
So just to let everybody know, I threw my contact information into the chat, my email address. Referrals come to me. We did share out the referral as well as the releases. If anybody has any specific questions, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm happy to schedule a call or just email information back and forth. And then just to put a plug in for one of the services, the community, the CETs, these are some trainings that START can provide, and they do go hand in hand with some performance-based contracting, which I know is something that is definitely on everyone's radar right now. And we can definitely help support some of those processes.
And those are scheduled to begin in February, so I can always send out that information of when those are beginning and the dates of those will occur monthly. So if you want to just have them in your calendar if you're looking for trainings.
That is great. David, Stephanie, thank you so much. David, thanks for putting your contact info. If you didn't get Stephanie, you can feel free to drop your email in the chat if you want to do that. Please do share with us dates of trainings. We will definitely get that out to members. We will definitely get your slide deck out as well. And we want to continue to follow what you're doing. David, thanks for making the connection to performance-based contracting, that model there. I wish we had more time to kind of explore some of that with you, but we thank you so much for being here today. Very interested in continuing to stay tuned in this work and share it with our members. So I wanted to cover just a couple of final items. Michelle, thanks for hanging around. This was something that I probably intended that Jen would be around and she had to jump off early. I wanted to go back to just a couple of things before we leave today's session. So I'm not going to cover everything on here, but certainly you heard a lot of updates today in terms of what's happening with funding, the delay. So continue to inform us, continue to talk to the appropriate people that you work with your organizations to make sure that everything is in alignment with gross adjustment, your billing's working properly or it's not. A couple of things at the bottom that I wanted to call out. There were adjustments, corrected rates were published at the beginning of the month in terms of CPS. We know a lot of members participated in rate appeals. We want to make sure people know, because I've been asked this question. We do know that people were denied tier assignments, are considering or in some cases have decided to file rate appeal. If you're having that discussion internally, encourage you to contact your attorney if you're involved in appeal. K&L Gates is the attorney we have worked with. We've got several members. So we continue to engage with ODP just on trying to move all of that forward, mainly to make sure that we can just get out whatever part of the appropriation that we can in this fiscal year. So we'll continue that dialogue. As I said earlier, we'll check the Q&A in the chat. I will personally make sure we have those discussions on any of your input as the associations reconvene. And again, in a unified way, get our thoughts organized so we can communicate directly with Kristen on some recommendations we would like to see. As we've heard many of you say here today, and we said in our dialogue with Kristen, we would just like to see as many providers get qualified into the upper tiers as possible to start to see some of those funds flow forward and make sure that they are available as we go into next fiscal year. So Craig, if you can go to the next slide identified. I just want to make a couple of announcements. It's really not, I think it's go to 16, Craig, please. It's not too early to really talk about some news that we have. Community College actually came up today. So we do know that Dan Miller's Disability Summit will be May 8th and 9th at Allegheny County Community College. So you can mark that down. We are already underway making some planning. This is the time of year that Dan really likes to nail down the program. So we're very pleased that ODP, well, I'm sure ODP will be there. TPA will again be a partner. Hopefully ODP will be there. I know that's always an invite and always part of our dialogue, trying to get Kristen and other folks there. But certainly, Michelle, we welcome you to it's in the neighborhood. Well, it used to be. It's going to Allegheny County College now. So, however, we will be involved. We will attend again to host a legislative luncheon. Our thinking is really we would like to sort of have you engage, bring folks, DSPs, talk about your services, do a little bit less structured of a program, but we will be involved. And also very early, but not too early to talk about it, July 25th, we expect to have our conference at the Regional Learning Alliance in person, bring everybody together. Hopefully, again, as Kristen has done for the last couple of years for us, came herself, brought her leadership team, spent the day with us. That's always a great event. And finally, happy holiday season to everybody. Our next meeting, January 31st. We do expect PA Tech Accelerator. Some folks we've talked about here in the past. Kristen made some mention of this, ARPA funding being involved. But please enjoy the holiday season. Celebrate whatever you celebrate. Enjoy. And have a great time with your family and friends. Thank you for being here today. We will be in touch with you with information as needed. Thanks again for a great year. We will see you officially again in 2025.